Hey everybody, Scoutcrafter here again. It's Monday, Mishmash Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. Boy, did that go fast. This weekend really went fast, especially if you're like me, if it was nice weather and there was a lot going on. So it's good. It's good. I wish the rest of the week would go that fast, right? For some of you that are working. We have a couple things to talk about today because it is a Mosh of a Monday. And let's get started right away because I want to fit in a bunch of stuff. Okay, first up, I want to talk about what I got from Kent, these beautiful go, no-go gauges. Now, they're pretty much useless to anybody unless you're in the business or industry, but I want to talk about how interesting these are. I've always been fascinated with measurements, especially when they get into the really minute measurements. Now, if you're a carpenter, a lot of times you will break an inch. An inch is what we use over here in the States. We only use it very few places in the world, but we use an inch. We break it down to 16 segments is what you basically use as a carpenter, because if you have a 16th of an inch, that's pretty close, you know. If you want to get really, as a carpenter or a cabinet maker, this is a 32nd. You break it down to 32 segments. So then you're getting a little bit more accurate. Now, machinists, they break an inch down to 1,000 segments. Think about that. Now, 1,000 segments into an inch. You say, how minute is that? Well, this little piece of steel here, you see, you can hardly see it. It's about the thickness of a human hair. This is 5 thousandths. And you can always check it when you take your calipers here and you put it up here. You can see it reads 5 thousandths, you know, and it's also written on here. And these come in what's called feeler gauges. You know, they come in a stack like this, and usually used for spark plugs and things like that. A lot of mechanics use them. But now when you get into really good machining, I mean, guys that are top of the line, they go into they break an inch into 10,000 segments. Mind-blowing to me, because you can't even tell the difference. Well, that's what these go, no-go gauges are used for. Now, the more accurate your measurements become, the harder it is to take a measurement. So on an assembly line, or when you're doing aerospace, things like that, you have to have something that you're sure. You can't have a guy that's measured, because I could measure something, you know, especially I'm using just this as an example, but you could take a measurement here, and right now it says here we're at 42 thousandths, right? But if I squeeze it a little bit harder, or if I don't squeeze it enough, I can possibly be off by a half a thousandth, even the thousandths. That's unacceptable. So what they do, instead of having some chooch sitting there trying to measure, and you know, after a while you're getting sloppy, they came out with these no-go gauges, okay? So if they had to have a hole that was a certain size, you have one side is, you can see here, this says no go. Let me get that in so you can focus. There we go. It says no go. And there are many different ways to use these. For example, if the go would fit into a hole, but the no-go doesn't fit, you would know that the hole is just right. But if the no-go does fit, then it's too big. They also have jigs and standing things that you could fit it on. So there's a ton of ways you could use these. Now, what I find so interesting, a lot of these are, you know, quite a bit different. Like it might be 250 thousandths on one side and 252 thousandths, because 2 thousandths in the machinery, you know, is pretty thick. So you say, okay, that one won't fit, so the hole is good. What's interesting about this is, look at the difference. This is only 5 10,000ths of a difference from this side to this side. So for most of us measuring, like if I wanted to use an old-fashioned calipers, right? Now watch this. You see how it's just touching to go through here? So you say, okay, that's that size. Now when I flip it around, it's the same thing. But meanwhile, there's a difference of 5 10,000ths between one and the other. So think about what machining, what part they were making that 5 10,000ths of an inch was that critical. So that's why I find these absolutely amazing. And the fact that they were hardened steel, these things were crazy expensive when they're new. Again, they're useless unless you're using a certain type of machining, but pretty interesting. Okay, next up, I picked up this beautiful spiral reamer. I picked this up at the dollar table, at the meet. And let me show you how interesting these are, because a lot of people don't use these anymore, and you see them all over this, especially because they got these shanks on them, you know, that were made for the old braces, which a lot of people don't use. But what happens is, you know, you can see here somebody cut that shank off or whatever, or tried to put a round shank on here with some degree, but I use them by hand. Okay, so what these are a spiral reamer. A lot of times you'll cut something like pipe or things like that, and this would ream and take the burr out of the inside. You know, let's say you cut a piece of pipe. I like to use these on PVC and whatnot, but if you cut a piece, you're going to have burr on here, and for some, it doesn't matter for certain things, but it's always good practice to try and smooth out the inside here and take off that burr. And this is a great tool to do it, especially because, and you want to keep these fairly sharp. When you place this in here and you turn it, you could see the little bit of the shavings that'll come off. You see it on the tool, but as you turn it and press in, it works much better if you have it on a drill or something. It'll put a nice chamfer on the inside here, and depending on how sharp your tool is, like this one's much sharper. You see the shavings it's taken off? Look at that. And look at the nice inside. So this is always a nice tool to have if you should come across one. See how that works? It works on all different types of pipes, and they can be sharpened, but this one here is a little bit worse for wear. So what we're going to do, first of all, we're going to give it a very light brass brush just away from the edges, and then we're going to dunk it in Evaporust, and I'll show you what it looks like when we come back. Especially when you use like a nylon brush or something, that it's really good to get in there, just to get off some of the surface dirt and everything, to let the Evaporust get in there. And you can see we already exposed some of the edges, but we'll sharpen this one up. But let me dunk it in the Evaporust and see how much of that we can remove. Okay, here we have just out of the Evaporust, and you can see now the Evaporust always leaves a little dark film, especially if it was heavily rusted like this. Now we're going to take the Dremel and the wire wheel, and we're going to get in between here and get out any of this excess, you know, dirt and whatever that's left in here, and we'll do that. Okay, now this is real time what you're seeing here, and what we're doing is we're addressing the sanding belt, to say fine sanding belt, and we're doing it in such a way that we're bringing it up and around so that we create a burr or a sharp. We're cleaning up all them edges, creating a burr, and that will be your cutting edge. And you can see here, you just got to keep rotating it, not working on one side more than the other, and because it has to be symmetrical all the way around to make a good cut. And it cleans up 1, 2, 3. Now you know my favorite part. Remember what this $1 Reamer looked like before we started. And we're calling this project done. I know what you're thinking now. Will it work? I showed you this in real time sharpening so you could see how long it takes. And you can see what the edge looks like now. We have a acceptable edge on here. And it's very sharp when you run your fingers this way. Very sharp. And if you look closely here, you could see, you see what that says? Greenfield Tap and Die. That's their insignia. And so this is a nice piece. Let me see. Now again, this is meant to use for reaming out different types of pipe. But here we just have some PVC. You can see it's gripping nice. It's making shavings here. And if you put it, I can't really grip. It's very sharp. But if you would put this into a drill, and you could burr out any type of pipe, or conduit or anything like that, you just put this in a brace and use it that way. So these are always good. When you see these, pick them up. You saw how rusty that was, right? Came out nice. Here we are on some Delrin. Again, just look at that. It takes off the shavings nice and leaves a nice edge inside. And again, very easy to use. Do the back side here. See that? It's just taking off a little bit, just enough to ream that inside. Next up, good friend of the show and a friend of mine, Ralph, goes by the name of Smithtown. You see him in the comments, and he's actually from Smith. He's not only a couple blocks from where we meet, and Ralph gave a couple items he wanted to see. He thought that everybody might find them interesting on the show, and they sure are interesting. 3 items here. First of all, this is an electric soldering iron. You can see here by the Sears and Roebuck Company, but you can see here it was made by Dunlap, which was another name they went under. number 5408. And let's take a look at this. Beautiful. These things are they still work. We're going to clean this up. I just want to show you before we do. And you can see here, look, it even had a price of $1.69. Can you see that? $1.69 back when it was sold. So how nice is that? And then another electric item. I love these cloth cords. I absolutely love these cloth cords, especially when they're good shape like this. Do you know what this is here? It is a paint remover or paint scraper. And what you would do is you would heat up the area here, and when it bubbled up the paint, you would scrape it off. Now, a flame is a great way to remove paint for a lot of things, and a lot of people used it for a long time. In fact, I showed Ralph, I said, that's where this scar came from on my hand. I was removing some paint with a torch upstairs in my kitchen, and I was just at the end, and when I scraped it off, the burning paint fell on my hand, but I had a lit torch in my hand, and I couldn't just drop the torch, so I had to shut off the torch while my skin was bubbling off. Anyway, that was like 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And then this cool knife. So let's just clean this up and see how these look. Okay, we had 3 successful restorations here. This one was a Skyway utility knife. You see it says Skyway utility knife. This is very old, and you can see what it was. It's almost like a box cutter. And how this would work is you would take your blade here. It came with, this is the type of blade you would get. You would press it onto these 2 little holes here, and then squeeze the knife together. When you squeezed it together, this would close up. When you close it, these 2 detents will slide over as you close it, and that's what locks that blade in there. Now, when this is shut, you could see you have what's commonly known as a box cutter and a replaceable blade. The only thing is, it's a little dangerous to put in your pocket or something, so you'd have to be careful with it, but it was an interesting design. Never saw this before. It must be way back, because they came back with a lot of safer and retractable blades, but very interesting design. Still works today. That's very interesting. Next up, we have the the Luro paint stripper or paint remover. You can see pat pending, so this is an old one. We're able to keep the nice finish on here. On the back, we got rid of all the paint. This has a heating element in here with heating wires going back and forth. But here's the thing that's important. You see this here? My dad was a big scraper guy. And the edge of the scraper has to be very flat and sharp. There's a burr on this side, and you do that with a file. So this way, you can see that hangs just a little bit low. So when you press this onto the item that you want the paint to be removed on, you hold it down, the paint will bubble up, then you just lift it up ever so slightly, scrape it off, and the paint will come off, or anything else that you want to take off with this heat. And these things lasted forever, so that came out real nice. Last up, we have our Dunlap from Sears electric soldering iron, and I wanted this one to come out because it got the box, right? So you want it to look pretty much as NOS as you can, and I think we did a pretty good job on here. First of all, the cord was all moldy and mildew, and I'll tell you what I did to get that cord. Look how nice I got that cord back. And now to get this cord looking good after it was all moldy and everything, I first went over with the green Scotch-Brite. That's the very inexpensive stuff you get at the dollar store. The green, it don't have a high abrasive content, but the green Scotch-Brite, and I used some Bonami. It's just like a glass cleaner to get off most of that mold and mildew. But then I finished up with this. This stuff is fantastic. I got this from Dean Collins, and this is called Moonshiner. It's quick detail. I'll tell you, this stuff works great. It puts a nice finish on everything, and I even wiped down the handle with that. Comes out real nice. Good stuff. Look what we did here. We got rid of all that rust that was on here. It's beautifully shiny now. Even cleaned up all the threads, cleaned up the inside of the cap. There's a ceramic cover in here. You can see there's the heating element. And this is a copper cap, and that was meant to be replaceable, and screws right on here. Now that looks beautiful. I left the tinning on because it's always good to have a tin tip in case you want to use it. But look how nice this came out and how Nice it looks almost NOS, doesn't it now? And beautiful soldering iron. A lot of people take these for granted. It is written on here, Dunlap. You could see it under certain... There we go. You see that? It says Dunlap, and gives the specifications, 80 watt. And you can use this AC or DC, which any heating elements you could usually use. So this was fun projects. Ralph, thanks so much. All three of these are just really beautiful. You know, I had a friend of mine ask me, he goes, how come car insurance is so expensive by where you live? We got the biggest chooches driving that you ever saw in your life. Check this out. This is a map of where I live. You see the blue dot. Look at the accidents. Each one of those triangles, or actually squares on edge, each one of those squares is an accident. And you tell me why insurance is so high around here. Okay, we had an interesting little mosh to start off the week. Special thanks to Ralph out in Smithtown. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. Hope you have a great week. Take care now. Bye-bye.